Hello class, Professor Cook here. Today we're going to be talking about gender and sexual diversity, discrimination, homophobia, and hate crimes. So this discussion should get you ready to take quiz 4 this week. I may have to split it into two parts depending on how long it takes us to get through slides. I want to give you a little bit of a heads up. This content is difficult. It may potentially be triggering for some of you, so I just wanted to let you know that. The good news is we're getting close to the end of our lectures. So after this content, I think our last week, next week, we'll be looking at a documentary about transgender children and also looking at how diversity is positive and how it makes us better and stronger as individuals and as a society. So we'll be ending on a more positive note. And then the very last week next week is the second to the last week, and the very last week we'll do our presentations, and I'll be telling you some options for that soon. Okay, so we need to kind of start this by looking at the difference. We discussed last time's kind of the inherent problems with the gendered constructions of sexuality in terms of masculinity being linked to violence, right? But I want to look at the very different rates of intimate partner violence, suicide attempts that young people and people who are of diverse sexual orientations face. So you don't have to memorize every number on this slide. I just wanted to show you the differences. And keep in mind, these are just some states and some cities here. And so the numbers that I show you after this are going to be more inclusive of the entire country. But you can see here, this is a percentage of high school students who report dating violence. Okay, so that's defined here. That's defined here on the bottom. But you can see that in this particular sample, students who identify, or young people who identify as gay or lesbian, had reported the highest rate of sexual violence or intimate partner violence, followed by bisexual, people who are questioning their identity, and then heterosexual. So we see unfortunate patterns of oppression. This set of data is slightly different, and this is the one, if I ask you about this on the quiz, this is the one I'm referencing, because that other one, remember, was limited to specific states and specific cities. This one is larger and has not just, it's actually not high school students, it's adults. So this is kind of giving you that picture. And unfortunately, what I want you to take away from this is that it is both women and men who identify as bisexual who face the highest rates of rape, sexual violence, and intimate partner violence. Just to clarify, rape, I think we know what that is, forced intercourse or penetration. Sexual violence other than rape would be other kinds of sexual assault. And then intimate partner violence is physical sexual violence, but also emotional stalking, psychological aggression among people who are partners or people who used to be partners. So the term for this used to be domestic violence, but we've shifted to intimate partner violence to kind of include people who are dating and don't necessarily live together, and also people who used to be dating. Unfortunately, those are categories we also need to look at, especially given the data on this slide, right? Okay, so again, the takeaway from this is that unfortunately, people who identify as bisexual face much higher rates of sexual and intimate partner violence among both men and women, and this is adults. I know it's dated. I don't think the patterns have significantly changed, okay? Because I also pulled this. This is looking at, again, the rates of violence among sexual violence and intimate partner violence for LGBT people. So 44% of lesbians, 61% of bisexual women, compared to 35% of heterosexual women. So this is showing and similar sort of patterns for gay men and bisexual men compared to heterosexual men. Actually, heterosexual men have a higher rate of of reporting than gay men. So that's a slight difference there. But it's kind of, again, that intersectional perspective is important here, because what we're seeing is that what you experience, of course, is correlated with other marginalized statuses, unfortunately, in our society. Okay, so this is adding in here. Again, I'm not going to ask you about every number on this slide, but I'd like you to be aware of the idea that if we add in not just gender identity and sexual orientation, but we add in race or ethnicity, we see worse pictures for some folks and worse rates of this for other folks. So as I think you are probably aware after reading Indigenous American women and other slides that we've talked about, American Indian individuals who are transgender have the highest rates of sexual assault. American Indian women have higher rates of sexual assault, much, much higher than other groups in society. And overall, 47%, almost half of transgender people are sexually assaulted at some point. So these are really, really difficult and frustrating numbers, and we need to do more to prevent sexual assault and violence. Moving on to another really difficult topic, looking at suicide thoughts and attempts based on gender and sexual orientation here. In this study, this is a little dated, but you can see that this is putting together gay and bisexual boys, lesbian and bisexual girls. So that's really kind of gross categorization, meaning, of course, there's a lot of diversity in these identities, but the idea is to get these basic comparisons between groups. And what you can see is that folks who identify, again, as gay or bisexual, lesbian or bisexual, have higher rates of both suicidal ideation and actually attempting suicide. So thoughts about suicide, again, is reporting those thoughts, and attempting is making, some sort of plan and attempt. Okay. Then again, adding in the racial ethnic component, we can see that depending on your racial ethnic background and group, you and the youth here, you have different rates of suicide attempt from group to group, and then these are separated by sexual minority and sexual majority. Sexual minority here means essentially non-straight youth who are not straight. So this probably includes both gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender individuals into one category. I'm aware that that's, again, like the last slide, that's gross and sort of problematic. I don't mean gross as in icky, I mean too broad. Sorry, I should have explained that. It's a little broad of a category, but I think what we get here is some important understanding of looking at these rates. Look, they're always more than double, depending on whether you are a sexual minority, sexual majority, and this is much more recent than those other slides. I would say 2015, 2016, something like that. And then, but the more intersectional identities you have, the rates are higher, unfortunately. Okay, so again, kind of paying special attention to this Native American, Pacific Islander category, and comparing that with other groups. Okay, I know this is likely the most depressing set of slides here, but it's important for us to understand this. As I said, I want to explain a little bit about hate crimes. Hate crimes are when offenders choose a victim because of some social identity, which is race, usually ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or disability. So again, these are crimes based on bias. Most of these are, several of these are vandalism and property crime, but there is a significant percentage with person-related crimes involving violent crimes. Only 1 in 5 of these is anti-white, so very disproportionately based on sexual orientation, race or ethnicity, religion, gender identity, etc. Um, and unfortunately, this is growing. So we are seeing an increase in the rate of hate crimes since 2016. I'm guessing you can put that together with what else happened in 2016. Again, correlation, not necessarily causation, correlation between events in 2016. But if we pull this and break it down by what is categorized as race and ethnicity, we see a big jump between race and ethnicity, religion, and sexual orientation to gender identity. So in the past, these other identities have experienced more hate crime than race or ethnicity. This is 2016 showing an increase in hate crimes based on race and ethnicity. Again, this percentage, 57%, means that of all the hate crimes tracked, 57% were based on the targeted individual's race, ethnicity, ancestry. And then 21% were based on religion. And often that is going to be non-Christian religious groups. Okay. So if we look at this, again, don't need to memorize all of this here. What I want you to look at here is if we look at a year and we look at all of the hate crimes reported, we can try to look at how things have shifted from year to year. So you can see in 2001, after 9/11, we saw a large increase in hate crimes overall and a really big increase in anti-Islamic hate crimes. Right here, that's that light green category. So you can see that they do shift over time, and you can see that this one is, these are now separated by sexual minority identities here. So it gives you a little bit of a more nuanced picture. And then again, this only goes through 2010. So if we had 2015, 2016, we would see more increases again. And that, again, this is only reported crime. So this may not cover all hate crimes. Okay, something completely different on this slide is the gender unicorn. I probably should have put this in the last set of slides. I think a lot of you have seen this before, either in my class or other classes, but essentially this is just helping us to understand the differences between gender identity, expression, sex, and attraction. Okay, so just to explain this, and I did this a little bit with the terms in the last set of slides, sex is what your genitalia are and what your chromosomes are. That's why you've got a little image of DNA, and it is assigned at birth. So typically those options are female, male, or other or intersex. Sex assigned at birth. Okay. Your gender identity is how you think of yourself in your own head. Like, do you think of yourself as more female, male, or another gender? So this might be agender, fluid, non-binary. And I like that they've got a scale here, an arrow indicating you can feel like extremely female, right? Or you can feel kind of more in the middle of female, or not female, but just enough to sort of identify that way, if that makes sense. Your gender expression, there's this green sort of dotted, I don't know what, graphic there, and that's supposed to be indicating that we may or may not express our identity consistently with the identity, and we may express it differently than how we actually feel. Okay, so gender identity is how I think of myself. Gender expression is what I show the rest of the world. So I'll use myself as an example, and I'll talk about a friend of mine a little bit. So I identify as a woman, and my expression, however, sometimes is more feminine and sometimes is less feminine, sometimes is more masculine. I like that. I like to be able to express that side of myself. And I even think of myself as, probably here on the femininity scale, if you will. So again, that's that's kind of how I think of myself. What I present depends on how I'm feeling on a given day. Okay. A friend of mine identifies as non-binary, and some days they will present a very feminine expression, and some days they will present a very masculine expression of their identity. So they kind of shift back and forth depending on their mood, and then their identity is truly non-binary. Mine is not, but I can still have some varied expression within that identity. Hopefully that made sense. The main important thing to think about is the difference between sex, identity, expression, and attraction. So these last two scales and indicators here are separating physical attraction and emotional attraction. The idea here is that you can be a person who experiences romantic attraction, but you're not physically or don't have feelings of sexual attraction to individuals. So people who don't experience sexual attraction often identify as asexual, but they may not be aromantic. So they could be in a relationship and be having sex, but they just identify as asexual. It's not a defining trait for them. They don't necessarily have those feelings of attraction. Okay? So again, I like the scalar dimension here because this can shift over time. So you can be someone who identifies as female, identifies as a woman, expresses feminine, and is attracted to women, right? And emotionally attracted to women. And that person would likely identify as lesbian, but not always, okay? So a transgender individual is likely someone who was assigned one category at birth, but thinks of themselves as a different category than they were assigned at birth. Okay. I want to move into talking about redefining realness. I am going to put this slide into your mini homework for this week, so that will be coming for you. Janet Mock is a great writer. I really appreciate her book, and I hope you're enjoying reading it. I think it kind of summarizes a lot of the things we've been learning about. I mean, thinking about how race and ethnicity affected her, thinking about her class background and her experience as a trans woman, right? I find that really, really helpful for understanding something that a lot of us don't experience on an individual level, okay? So Janet Mock, enjoy the book. Let me know if you have questions, and we will come back to this discussion in our little mini assignment. So microaggressions, just a reminder, because hopefully you might have figured out already that some of those statements that are applied to Mock are categorized, we could possibly categorize as a microaggression. Everyday verbal, nonverbal, environmental slights, snubs, insults, they are usually unintentional, but they communicate assumptions, negative messages based on your marginalized group status. So we've talked about this before because I think I've talked about some microaggressions I've faced about gender, about assumptions, and I'm sure we have all experienced this and possibly also inadvertently done these to other people, whether or not we meant to. It's part of our culture, unfortunately. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about Islamophobia. What this is prejudice against, hatred toward, or fear of the religion of Islam or Muslims. And unfortunately, these crimes, Islamophobia and hate crimes against people of this religious identity increased after 9/11. You can see some examples of hate crimes, and also this is a hate crime. This is just microaggression. I don't know that person is committing a crime, but it's obviously expressing a problematic attitude because, equating Islam with terrorism is the same as if you would equate Christianity with the person that went and shot up the Planned Parenthood in Colorado Springs. That person does not stand for all Christians. just like individuals who attacked the U.S. and engage in wars with the U.S. or terrorism, they do not stand for all Muslims or all of Islam. I don't know if you remember this. This young man was trying to make a clock and brought this to school, and because he is Muslim, the administration freaked out and assumed he was bringing a bomb, even though it was a science project and it was absolutely not a bomb. This is showing that cultural attitude of Islamophobia embedded in our minds. Okay. What I want to leave you with today is a little preview of the next set of slides we'll be talking about, and that is, why is diversity important? Diversity, we find when we study it, actually does a lot of things for individuals and groups. It enhances creativity. It's helpful in getting different thinking, more different kinds of thinking, problem solving. It helps with innovation. And research supports this. So studies of small groups revealed that if there was diversity in terms of racial and ethnic group identity in the group, they actually were better at problem solving than a group of all white individuals. People are more likely to think about a different opinion if it's presented by someone different from them. That's interesting and surprising. I think most of us would think, there'd be sort of an affinity for someone of the same group telling you something, but they've actually found the opposite. Deal with that. Durkheim is a not so subtle dig into the idea that diversity of opinions and thinking can actually create more group solidarity. So you can read this on your own if you'd like. It's not required. It's just, this is kind of an interesting article that I found a while back that cited some of that research. So I will stop here for today. Let me know if you have questions, especially about those statistics that are difficult, or if you have any questions before the quiz, and I will check in with you soon. Thanks.